I want to bring in retired General David Petraeus, former head of U.S. Central Command, which covers the Middle East region. He's also served as CIA director under President Obama. General Petraeus, appreciate you being with us. A senior U.S. official told CNN Jim Sciutto that American forces are preparing for what they described as a major uptick in strikes on Iran over the next 24 hours. This next phase is going to focus heavily on destroying missile production, unmanned aerial vehicles, naval capability. President Trump, Secretary Rubio both previously said that the biggest U.S. strikes are yet to come. What do you expect to see in the coming hours? And how do you assess what we have seen over the last 3 days in the region?
Well, what we've seen is just extraordinary numbers of strikes with extraordinary effects. The elimination and the killing of the supreme leader is a truly extraordinary achievement, and a number of the other leadership figures also going after headquarters and so forth. But I think the focus now, Anderson, is on the retaliatory capabilities. Not that they haven't been doing this already, but they're seeing what the effects are, in particular of the Shahed drones. It's not a good exchange to shoot a Patriot missile costing a couple $1 million for a $20,000 drone. You and I have actually seen what Shahed drones did in Ukraine until they dramatically improved their defenses against them. And that's a larger threat than in the past of that category. So I'm sure they'll be focusing on the drone storage locations, the drone launch sites. In addition, as you noted, going after the missile stockpiles, the missile launchers, which have already been reportedly reduced very substantially, but also the missile construction facilities in this case as well. They've been going after the naval capability, and that's, of course, to preclude them blocking the Strait of Hormuz, although shipping has already been reduced there quite considerably with the attack of a couple of ships just outside the strait. So I think, again, the focus is to make sure that the missile math continues to work out. And that is, how many missiles do they have and launchers? And now also, how many Shahed drones do they have? Because I think it's the Shahed drones that have actually killed our soldiers versus how many interceptors of all different types do we have. And I'm sure there's a good bit of effort, very short term, going on to focus all of the assets that are capable for as comprehensive a defense against the Shahed drones as can be developed in the near term.
Is it clear to you what the objective is in terms of the United States? And obviously the objective is going to, the methods are going to determine what the objective ultimately accomplishes.
Well, there are a number of objectives. Keep in mind that the military is given a set of missions. A mission consists of a task and a purpose. Attack the missile launchers, assets, the construction, in order to prevent the missile threat to degrade it very considerably. The same, again, about all of these different efforts, including, of course, degrading further or destroying any residual nuclear capability, is a very considerable objective of this. And with the International Atomic Energy Agency announcing just before the operation began that there may be some stockpile of 60% enriched uranium buried underneath the Esfahan facility, I would suspect that at some point they're going to go back and drill down through that and make sure that that is never accessible. But the real one, of course, is what about attacking the regime leaders, the regime itself? And here I think the military mission does not have a purpose for which that task is being conducted of bringing about regime change. I think this has been redefined a bit or clarified a bit in the recent 24 to 36 hours, where it would be to set conditions for the possible overthrow of the regime. But of course, that's going to rely on some developments that I'm not sure are the base case right now. That would need to require an opposition that would all of a sudden have a lot of guys with a lot of guns and a willingness to use them against very substantial regime forces. Let's keep in mind that if you total up all of the regime forces, the Revolutionary Guards Corps, the besieged militia, the National Police, the Ministry of Intelligence, the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, you're talking about 1 million men under arms, and they have shown a willingness to be very brutal with those weapons, killing tens of thousands of innocent demonstrators, imprisoning tens of thousands of others. So the question really is, where could an element be developed or break off or find a charismatic leader who can mobilize sufficient men under arms to oppose this regime, given all that ruin that it has brought onto Iran. It's very clear to the people, for example, that this regime has driven their economy into the ditch, made them poor nationally and isolated them internationally. But the question is, where could that force come from? So I actually think that the military missions are quite clear. The tasks and the purposes associated with accomplishing those tasks. The real question is, can setting the conditions for a regime result in Iranians being able to take advantage of that situation?
Colonel, I appreciate your time. I always appreciate speaking with you. Is there any way at this point to gauge what's really happening versus what the administration is saying is happening when it comes to, I guess, annihilation or obliteration, words what they would use, of Iranian's ballistic missile program, nuclear program, as well as its Navy?
There really isn't. And this is because the internet inside Iran has been shut off. And so we don't have any sort of independent confirmation from inside the country, from people on the ground, as to what's happening. So right now, unfortunately, we're going to have to take the Trump administration's word as to what is occurring. But I think it highly unlikely that after only 2 or 3 days of bombing, that all the objectives have been met. This campaign is going to have to go on for weeks if they really want to destroy everything that they say they want to destroy. And of course, regime change is another story altogether.
Okay, and so separating those two, and I know they're inseparable, but for the purposes of this conversation, when you talk about what they want to destroy, they're trying to lay out that this could take weeks, and the president has shifted his narrative there, right? From days to 4 to 5 weeks, whatever it takes, he said. And yet, on the other hand, when you look at the reporting that's out there, the analysis, the reality, there is a missile defense issue when it comes to the Gulf region specifically and more broadly about how much time the United States has. How do you square that circle? How much time does the U.S. really have before the missile defense in place for the region, such that it is? Because we know a lot is getting through. We know the Dubai airport is, swarmed with thousands of people who can't get out, right? We have imminent issues here. How much time does the U.S. and Israel really have?
Well, there's two things going on here. One is that the further the campaign progresses, the fewer air defense assets we have, just because they are being shot into the air in response to Iranian attacks. But also, the Iranians have fewer missiles to send because they're being targeted by the air campaign. So this is going to be a test of wills and a test of attrition. One, the Iranians think that they can win in the long run. But the Trump administration now says they're willing to go a matter of weeks and longer if necessary. The real question for the Trump administration is, what percentage of the stockpile of U.S. munitions do they want to use in this one particular conflict? Because anything they use here is not available for use by Ukraine or in the defense of Taiwan.
And obviously, which is crucial, especially when you talk to possible material or ammunition being moved from the Asia-Pacific theater to here. There's some breaking news I want to share with you, Colonel, just crossing in for our viewers. We're just getting this information from the Israeli military right now. They say that they have hit, their words, dozens of targets belonging to the Iranian regime and its intelligence services in Tehran. So they're putting that out there. Now, we've seen evidence, right? As I mentioned, Colonel, we've seen some of the images, but they're now saying specifically dozens, and they're giving a bit more detail as I'm speaking here. They're saying that those dozens of strikes specifically targeted headquarters, bases, and regional command centers of, and I'm quoting them, the Iranian terrorist regime's internal security bodies. Now, that's coming from a statement that the IDF has just put out. Colonel, what's your reaction to that? There's a lot in there that they're laying it out. They're distinguishing between actual supplies, right, and intelligence services, but they're also putting in regional, not just Tehran.
Yeah, so this is interesting because what it's showing is that we and the Israelis have a great degree of intelligence and targeting information, and that this air campaign is progressing down a list of targets, checking off the ones they hit and then moving on to the next. And this just happens to be the day for the Iranian intelligence to be on the receiving end. And so there's more to come here, but I'm pretty much really impressed with the degree of intelligence and targeting information that the U.S. and Israeli forces have shown, and that has given them the upper hand right now in the strikes.
Yeah, it certainly appeared, at least from what we understand from the reporting, that the human intelligence so central to the initial strike here actually came from possibly a CIA intelligence agent on the ground, as opposed to Israeli, which we know, obviously, they have a deep network within Iran, but that was a CIA specifically. Colonel Mansour, do you think right now, if you had to think about how long this is going, given that there are multiple goals issued by the Israelis, the U.S. is vague on its goals, okay? How long do you think this goes? Especially, I want to context again with what we're seeing in the rest of the Gulf. Having the world's largest airport completely shut down is a black hole in global air travel. That is something that has a clock ticking on it.
Well, let's take two of the objectives off the table. That would be regime change and Iranian support for militias around the region. That leaves three goals, which is their nuclear program, their missile capabilities, and their Navy. And to destroy all the targets associated with those three areas, I think would take 4 to 6 weeks at a minimum. And then, of course, we'll have to get the battle damage assessment and re-engage those that either we missed or that new targets pop up. But it's going to be an extensive campaign. This is not going to be over in a matter of days.
General Clark, let me start with you. President Trump is telling CNN the big wave, his words, big wave is still coming in this war with Iran. What do those new comments tell you about where this war is now heading?
Well, I think the president's trying to indicate that he's going to achieve escalation dominance. Maybe we're talking about the use of more of the Lucas drones that have been publicly announced. Maybe there's some other efforts. Maybe there's a different type of cyber weapon that's going to be used against Iran. And there are still some air reinforcements apparently moving in.
David, despite the killing of Iran's supreme leader, the U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said this morning, this is not a regime change war, his words, but rather an effort to destroy Iran's conventional arsenal. So it can't be used as an umbrella as Iran pursues its nuclear ambitions. What's your reading of that?
Well, Wolf, I was a little confused by some of what Mr. Hegseth said. First of all, the president himself, in his taped statement on Saturday morning announcing the opening of this, invited the Iranian people to hang back until the military action was over and then rise up against their government. That sounded like regime change to me, and not only that, but encouraging the Iranian people to bring it about. So when Secretary Hegseth said today that a goal was not regime change, I was a little confused. Now, my colleague, one of my colleagues spoke to President Trump yesterday afternoon, and we wrote a story about this. And he laid out 3 different scenarios, which were somewhat contradictory. One of them was that everybody rises up. The second one was that he would get to sort of pick some leadership the way he did in Venezuela. And then he had a third option, which was that a sort of more compliant Iranian government emerged. And it's not clear to us right now which one of those he's pursuing, but obviously each one would require very different strategies.
Yeah, important point. General Clark, this conflict clearly is expanding right now with Hezbollah in Lebanon launching rockets into Israel, and Israel now conducting airstrikes and not ruling out a ground operation against Hezbollah in Lebanon. What needs to happen to keep all of this from spinning into an overall regional war?
Well, I think it's dependent on the rate at which the United States forces can degrade the ability of the Iranians to strike back in the Gulf, and simultaneously the ability of the Israelis to repress and go after Hezbollah. It is a contest of arms right now. The Iranian leadership is not ready to throw in the towel, obviously, and so it's going to have to be a matter of the destruction of their means to resist. And the Secretary of War said, General Kane said, we have air superiority in the region. That's good. We need air supremacy. We need to be able to loiter overhead and watch every single square kilometer near a launch site and watch those missiles roll out and take them out before they could be launched. We don't know what the size of the remaining Iranian inventory is, maybe several thousand still, especially short range. It's clearly in Iran's strategy to cause maximum chaos in an effort to force the United States to halt the operation. And so this is a test of arms, and Admiral Cooper has got to be able to turn those sorties, load the aircraft, get them in action. He's got to find the targets that are significant. And Wolf, one of the problems you always have in an air campaign, it always starts out looking great because you pre-plan the most significant targets, or at least what you think is the most significant. But as it goes on day after day, you've got to continue to generate new targets for those aircraft. When we were in Kosovo in 1999, target generation was a big problem. We ended up with 1,000 aircraft, and we were really scrambling to find useful targets. So if this were to go on for several weeks, that's going to be a real challenge for us, despite the fact we spent 30 years looking at Iran. Where are the targets that the aircraft striking can make the greatest strategic impact on the Iranian government?
And very
That's
quickly, General Clark, before I let you go, yesterday the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, the Army announced they were mobilizing, activating 100,000 reservists to begin active duty right now. Is that designed for some sort of ground assault against Hezbollah in Lebanon? Or is it possible the Israelis are actually thinking of deploying ground forces into Iran?
I'd be surprised if they were going into Iran. We could get them there. If we got a landing site, we could move people in by our own air transport. They wouldn't have to go around through the canal or something like this. But 100,000 is not enough. I'd be more inclined to think that there would be Mossad and agency people in there providing weapons and support to get to local resistance, especially starting with the Kurds up in arms against the regime, if the intent is covertly to undermine that regime.